And certain key questions are being raised over the entire three-day conference. Firstly is the timing of the stalwarts resolution proposing sweeping changes in the ANC electoral system suspect, and can participation of civil society in stalwarts conference be construed as interference in the internal party structures? And the stalwarts conference are just a mouthpiece for certain factions within the party? And did politics preceding the consultative conference set the tone for widening divisions? And should the ANC-NEC heed the resolutions taken at the Stalwarts and Veterans Conference? And we're joined in studio by Dr. Faisal Randera, ANC stalwart, and Oliver Dixon is socio-political analyst, Mosiri Tsianes with the South African Liberty Foundation as their chairperson. You're most welcome to join us on social media. Let's just start with you, Dr. Randera, in the objectives that this consultative conference wanted to achieve, but not taking, or rather ignoring, the precedents as to what happened before we got to where we are. Do you think that the relations were severed even before you got together, and what do you aim or hope to achieve out of this?
Firstly, I don't think relationships have been severed, actually. We continued to have discussions with the ANC leadership even after the policy conference, when many people said relationships have been severed. Over the last while, we've been meeting, we've met all the, for want of a better expression, presidential hopefuls who will be nominated, hopefully, through the processes of the ANC's nomination process to the National Electoral Conference. We invited all NEC members and former NEC members through the office of the Secretary General. So I don't believe for a moment that our relationships have been severed with the ANC. We still continue to be ANC members. We believe in the ANC. We believe we are in a crisis in the ANC, so I don't think we want to take that away. But as far as any ill feeling or breakage of communication with the ANC goes, I don't think that applies. Just to say that if we look at the three-day conference, almost 17 NEC members attended the conference, and over the last 2 days, all the people who attended were ANC members.
But I'm saying the prelude, remember there was a suggestion that during the policy conference there ought to be 2 days set aside. That was not agreed on because the stalwarts and veterans wanted to set your own agenda and in terms of what ought to be discussed and the process going forward. Do you think that that in itself had led to the two structures almost speaking past each other?
No, I think that whole issue of the policy conference and the invitation of the policy conference is a lengthy discussion in itself. And I would actually want to say, if we were to actually have that discussion, it would be good, because I don't want to be quoted out of context that if there was an ANC leadership person here who had participated in those discussions, it would make much more sense. So, to me, that is water under the bridge. I think we should move on, and it's not really going to help the discussion that we're having right now.
All right, so let's go straight into it, where we stand at the moment. And I appreciate your views that obviously there are different perspectives and experiences in all of this. But the ANC has come out saying that this is not a sanction, or it's not a conference that is sanctioned by the party, and any resolutions taken will not necessarily be applicable. And I just want to bring up panelists in here, in how then this is going to resolve anything, as noble and as well-intended as it is. How is it going to change things?
One, the party leaders should be listening. to just because of, any process or any event is not part of a party's documented processes doesn't mean that it's not a significant process. So I think the party should listen to different voices, listen to the stalwarts as equally as you listen to the Youth League, listen to the Women's League as equal as you listen to any other formation within the structure, because all these formations are essential to the sustenance of the organization. Importantly, that doesn't mean that they must adopt every suggestion made by the stalwarts and the veterans. That's because not every suggestion would necessarily be the right one. For instance, pointing to the suggestion made by the gentleman who spoke there, Simpiwe, was that the CCMA should be resolving ANC disputes. I'm just thinking the CCMA is not there to solve electoral process issues. So that's the wrong organization. So one such suggestion wouldn't stick, but another one saying that the IEC, for instance, or a body of equivalence should handle the electoral process and facilitate there and should be the adjudicator and as well as the auditor of such a process is a fruitful suggestion because it lends credibility and legitimacy to the electoral process within the ANC. So one, importantly, it needs to be listened to and engaged, not necessarily means that it needs to change the party entirely.
In your view, Mr. Tsiana, isn't this now also, one could construe it as being one interfering with the structures of the ANC and also taking the independence away of the IEC to now having to facilitate the electoral processes within the party? It's
absurd, simply absurd. How do you undermine the independence? How do you undermine ANC as itself? ANC exists, is an organization with structures, with its own constitution, with its own policies, with its own governance. How it does its own matter should be respected in that. How do you go around and say that we want to bring another structure from somewhere else to come and conduct a process of election within the organization? This is absurd. You're undermining the structure. You yourself, as an organization, if the veterans themselves have conducted a process that was going to be elective, how are they elected, they themselves? The representative there, have they gone through the same process as the Youth League would do? Have they gone through the process as the Women's League would do? The Veterans League of the ANC and so forth? Now, if that process is in itself in reflection or rather mandated by the branches of the ANC, it becomes automatically a legitimate organization. Now, if it is an organization of elders who themselves feel aggrieved and see that the organization, the manner in which it's run, is not run the same way as they would have preferred, and they want to voice out a different opinion. No. Go through the process of the ANC in itself. Once you've emerged in there, then you have a voice. Probably you wouldn't even have a voice to vote whoever the elected leader is going to be. But key factor is that respect. People have to learn, just learn to respect the independence of the ANC.
Tsiana, let's bring Dr. Randera in here in what the intention is and what shape this process would take in getting the Independent Electoral Commission to overlook the membership or voting of the ANC. What was the rationale behind that?
Can we just contextualize it? Because I think if we just look at it as bringing the Electoral Commission in, but I want to actually firstly comment on what my colleague has said, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
To use the word respect and disrespectful, I think begins to actually bring the emotions into the discussion. I don't think we've been disrespectful of the organization. We are, as I stated early on, we are members of the ANC. We are members of branches of the ANC. We've argued for changes through our branches. We have, of course, participated in the recent electoral process and conference of the Veterans League. I think we are not external to the ANC. We are internal to the ANC. We bring a lot of wisdom and knowledge to the table. I don't think we are, members who just started yesterday. So I wanted to make that point. As far as the electoral process goes, what is our process at the present time? I've just participated in my branch's nomination for the December elections. Now, we know that the minimum membership in an ANC, in ANC branch has to be 100 members. We have one person who will go to the national conference. Depending on the size of the branch, those numbers could increase. Now, we know that the membership of the ANC is almost 800,000 at the present time, but only 4,500 people go to the conference, and those are the people who are allowed to vote. And hence, we are saying, firstly, that we need to reconsider whether this is the best way of involving every member of the ANC, and therefore, and it's not only us who have called for the one person, one vote.
Can I engage that? I think it's a valuable contribution to make, but it's because, quite honestly, a one person, one vote would be more reflective of the body of the ANC and the voice thereof. Fortunately, running elections and referendums are incredibly expensive. And one, it's a very tedious and extraneous exercise. This is why we don't opt to use that exercise. Unlike a national election, where there's ample funds to run this thing. One country on the continent in SADC actually couldn't afford an election quite recently and had to ask for external help just to have that election. I speak under correction, but I think it was the Gabon. These things arise because these things are expensive to run. Importantly, then, you have to ask yourself, will you be able to run an effective election if you adopt a one-person, one-vote policy? I personally think at the moment the answer is no. I think having a branch representative is still a true reflection of the voices of the people, unless, of course, you believe that branch representative will always sell out the branches or the people that they represent at an elective conference.
Is this the trust deficit in how the system is currently running, and not necessarily that it hasn't been effective in its process of appointing the next NEC or leadership structures?
You see, I think, again, unless we are willing to look at what has happened, and it's not only the stalwarts and veterans who are saying what goes on in the branches. The Secretary General, in his diagnostic report to the conference, to the policy conference, made the point very strongly about what is going on in our branches, how factionalism is beginning to impact on that, how the brown paper packet is beginning to impact on it, how different leaders in different regions can impact on the outcomes of the electoral process. So I think it's that context that we need to look at and say, is this the best system? Just to remind ourselves, going to conference, any conference, is never cheap. Is not a cheap process. If we ask the Secretary General of the ANC what it costs to run a conference of the one that is going to take place in December, it will run into millions of rands. So I think we need to temper that and say, if we are actually spending so much on that, we have systems available, electronic systems available, that can actually take care of that issue of the one person, one vote. But
it's something that still has to be developed and explored and deliberated.
Until we look at it and explore it properly, I don't want to make a conclusion that says it's too expensive or it's not too expensive. I don't want to dismiss the idea, because it's the principle that I want to argue for, rather than what the...
I just want to get in. You see, it's funny that this principle started after Polokwane. It's not the first time that we hear this. Just immediately after Polokwane, there was a change of a principle. Long before that, there was never a change of a principle. This was uttered by Mbazima Shilowa at that stage. It was uttered by Cope. Actually, when before they could even move to Cope. It was also by Musua Lekota. This idea, once you started to lose, or rather those that consider themselves a permanent members or rather leaders of the ANC have lost power, they wanted to change system. It cannot be right.
Can we deduce this to be a Becky Zuma faction, if you want to call it that, Dr. Randera?
It's a process, and the process has legitimacy, right? And I think we ought to have a discussion about which electoral process gives us the best form of democracy. It's a conversation where, that's not to say I agree. I genuinely still believe in the system we currently use. That's because it gives the branch significance. It means that people have to convene and discuss issues. In instance where you have a one vote, one person, one vote system, you make it impossible for people to want to incentivize themselves to convene and actually have discussions and actually debate whether or not that as a body of people they're voting in the right direction.
Yeah, but as we are saying, this is still an idea, a proposal that needs to grow legs. But let's just come back to what Retsiane here is saying, that because just from an observer's point of view, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the gathering of the 3-day consultative conference, one could easily say that these are all anti-Zuma persons or civil society groups. They've called on him to step down, including the stalwarts and the veterans. Why then shouldn't we see it as a mouthpiece that's also adding to the factionalism within the party?
Well, you see, of course, because there is a resolution to that effect, it immediately begins to sound as if it's an anti-Zuma thing. But again, there's the document. It speaks to many, many issues that are besetting the ANC at the present time. It talks to a number of resolutions that were taken at the 3-day conference. There was rich discussion that went on. It wasn't only the end point, which is where the resolution was taken, and I think if we approach it on a longitudinal way rather than just a point that says this is an anti-Zuma faction.
But it's a simple observation, Dr. Randera.
You see, again, it's an interpretation.
Yes, you just need to look at the groupings that were there and what they've said previously at public platforms.
The issue of recalling the president, this is not the first time that the stalwarts have called for it. We wrote at the time of the no vote confidence that took place in Parliament, we wrote to every NEC member of the ANC to say that it is time that they took their responsibility seriously. Now that debate has taken place in the NEC itself. It took place in Parliament. So it's not a new idea. And again, it is the context in which that we are asking for the president to step down or to be recalled by the NEC, by the ANC itself.
I mean, to be fair, it's entirely okay for the veterans to ask for Zuma to step down. Everyone has the prerogative to make an argument of their own, and he's correct. The stalwarts and veterans have been writing letters, poems, and everything alike to ask for Zuma to step down. But importantly, it does not necessarily conclude that that's the right call. It doesn't necessarily conclude that Jacob Zuma does not continue to enjoy support within the ANC and within the country. We're entirely speculative when we say the whole country doesn't want Zuma to continue as president, when that's not the case. There was a vote of no confidence, a secret ballot vote, where most of the country, at least most of the people who have media access, speculated that Jacob Zuma was going to be voted out, much like what we thought would happen to, in Zimbabwe last night. But importantly, Zuma came out of that no confidence debate with enjoying more than 80% of confidence within his own parliamentary caucus. So that's to say that various organizations, various structures within the ANC still believe that this is the man that they want to lead them. That has not, however, concluded that the debate by stalwarts and other organizations within the ANC are an incorrect voice or a voice not worthy of legitimacy and due consideration.
No, I'm just taking it from both sides, viewpoints. We heard former President Thabo Mbeki saying that the ANC currently is run by one faction, and I'm just saying that we know with COSATU, as at Sanko, Save SA, and the other civil
and SACP.
SACP that had, very vociferously so say they're in support of Cyril Ramaphosa. So then why can't we see this to be two sides of the same coin, essentially, in terms of perpetuating divisions?
Let's not again confuse the situation, because you're right. I mean, those movements have called in their own congresses, but at this conference, there was no call in support of any one delegate. And I think we need to be very clear about that. For instance, Lindy Sisulu sat throughout the 3 days of the conference. Does that mean that we were supporting her? No, not at all. She was there as an ANC member, as an ANC NEC member, She didn't come there because we were about to give her a platform. If Cyril Ramaphosa had turned up at the conference, similarly, so you know, this conference did not come out in support of anybody. So we must be very clear about that.
Okay, people said what they said independently, but it came together with the common purpose of you know, renewing the ANC and dealing with issues that are plaguing the country.
Just lastly, I really like that, because there's this fallacy, and it's you know, it's weird that people think that just because you want Jacob Zuma to step down, that necessarily means you're supporting Cyril Ramaphosa, when that's false. A lot of people want Jacob Zuma to step down, but still support Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma as our leader. So I think that one saying that we want Zuma to step down is a debatable cause, but that doesn't necessarily conclude you now support Cyril Ramaphosa. Cyril Ramaphosa still needs to work hard for those votes and support.
All right, very briefly, Masiri, because it is I think it's about a 13-page document, and some of the valid points in terms of organizational renewal, putting in modernized, automated systems, and being able to vet members and deal with all these arbitrary or rudimentary, you know, issues that the organization has had, putting an integrity commission, all of that we'll put onto our website. But I just want, very briefly, in your view, on how then do the two meet each other? Because we've already seen what you could call a standoff, to say this is not ANC endorsed, ANC doesn't have to necessarily react or even participate in it. So what's the point of it all?
Well, ANC shouldn't. From where I stand, it shouldn't recognize an organization that doesn't take it serious. First of all, what you needed to do, as you know, as elders, as you know, custodians of the ANC's what you can rules and regulations and constitution, and by and large, everything else that you consider to be moral within the organization, the first step that you do is to engage the then existing president. And secondly, is that you can never call for a president as an organization to come off. What kind of a call do you do that? That is a wrong call. It shows that you're taking other side, that you are supporting those that are calling for him to be removed. And surely there are some within the organization who are factional in their own a way of dealing with things, that they would want the president to come off. And you participate in the factions of organization.
Yeah, I think we've moved on from what Dr. Randera was saying in terms of the genesis of where this whole thing started in requesting a consultative process, having exhausted internal structures. That's good and well. I just want to conclude with some of the other recommendations where civil society is in alliance with the stalwarts and veterans, primarily around the issue of eradicating corruption and the current attempts to acquire nuclear. We've heard from Eskom and Public Enterprise Minister that we need to have a certain mix in our grid, and I think there are processes in place of already enabling that particular program. So what do you have as the veterans beyond the gathering and submission of resolutions to try and effect the change you want to see?
Where do we go from here? In other words, that's what you're asking. I just quickly want to say that the discussions that resulted in the NCC took place from the beginning. Our request was to meet with the president, and we met with the president. I mean, it's not that we have not met the president and the top five. And we mustn't deny that there's been a process that has taken place, and throughout that process there has been interaction going on. Where do we go from here? I think you're right. Firstly, I want to accept what has been said here, that we are not a constitutional structure. We are members of the ANC, long-standing members of the ANC. And we accept that in the Constitution, as has been pointed out by the Secretary General, there is no clause that deals with the National Consultative Conference. But whenever the ANC has been in crisis, and there have been many times that the ANC has been in crisis, and I don't want to repeat those instances, we have actually had national consultative conferences. So the precedent has been there. In the discussions that we had with the ANC at one stage, there was also an agreement that there would be a national consultative conference. So let's move on from there, and I really want to therefore say, yes, the resolutions can become empty if it cannot be taken any further. Now, we know that there is an electoral process taking place in 4 weeks' time, and therefore, we would like to believe that through a number of channels, these documents will be taken forward. Not formally, because we can't suddenly go and take a document to the elective conference, because people who get invited are there because of branch structures or whatever, and we will try and work through those structures to say,
all right, Dr.
Randera, there
Randera,
are important points that have been made.
We are out of time, but what I'm hearing you saying is that this somehow will find its way either at branch level or any other opportunity or forum to ventilate further and hopefully make its way where a decision may be taken in your favor or not. As the stalwarts and veterans. But thanks indeed for your time. We're going to have to leave it there. Dr. Faisal Randera, ANC stalwart, and Oliver Dixon, social-political analyst, and Mosiri South African Liberty Foundation chairperson. And you at home, thanks so much for watching. We take a quick break. ANC Decides is up next with Mfundo Mabalana.